Curious about the free use kink? Discover what it is, how it works, why people enjoy it, and the rules of consent that make it both thrilling and safe. I'm Brandon the Dom. Let's dive in. What could be hotter than having free sexual access whenever you want? Imagine a partner, a hole or a pole, who not only consents, but loves being used whenever the urge strikes. No hesitation, no buildup, just raw gratification. That's the fantasy behind the free use kink. The reality, however, is much more nuanced. It's not about mindless access without responsibility. It's about trust, communication, and clarity around carefully negotiated boundaries that make such freedom possible. So we're going to explore what free use kink is, how it differs from similar dynamics, and how to set up a free use relationship so it's mutually enjoyable by both parties. So free use is a fully consensual dynamic between adults in which one or more partners are allowed to sexually use the other partner at almost any time. And the arrangement is established through pre-negotiation of limitations and boundaries, including what kind of sexual acts can occur and when and where free use is in effect. In essence, the agreement functions as blanket consent, given in advance to be used for these specified activities. Often found inside of Dom-sub dynamics, here's how it works. If the Dom becomes horny at any time, they can do a limited range of things to the submissive without needing to ask, seduce, or engage in foreplay. They are allowed to use the submissive to satisfy whims, base needs, and primal urges, prioritizing physical gratification above all else. There's no awkward, do you want to have sex dance? It's just simply available. Now let's talk about free use versus CNC or consensual non-consent versus rape. Because the partner being used may not always respond enthusiastically, say if they're asleep, there's a misconception that free use is abusive or non-consensual. But with the proper communication and negotiated boundaries beforehand, it isn't. Free use is sometimes mistaken for CNC or consensual non-consent because of some of their similarities. CNC involves simulating non-consensual acts within a pre-negotiated, agreed-upon framework. Here's how to distinguish between the three. So free use. You consent in advance to allow your partner to engage in sexual or other predefined activities without asking each time. However, you can still say stop, no, don't, or use a safe word if you'd rather not engage in that moment. Now, CNC, you consent to allow your partner to engage in sexual or other predefined activities, either once or ongoing, but you agree to pretend that you are not consenting. In CNC, the words stop, don't, no usually doesn't end the activity. Only the pre-negotiated safe word to stop all CNC is. And then rape, which is different than these other two, there is no consent. Sexual activity is forced and pleas to stop are ignored. Now, while some people see little difference between free use and CNC, I find the distinction to be important. For me, it matters deeply that my partner genuinely wants the activities and that I know they want those activities. Having had close family members that have severe trauma from sexual abuse and seeing how much has shaped their mental health, CNC is actually a hard limit for me. To me, it feels like playing with psychological dynamite. With free use, by contrast, everything has been discussed in advance, much like CNC, but unlike CNC, my partner isn't pretending to resist. If they don't want something at that moment, they're going to say so, and we're not going to do that thing. Now let's talk about some types of free use. Free use commonly takes one of three forms. There's free use to all, where the person consents to unrestricted sexual access by anyone at any time. This setup rarely exists anywhere outside of porn or a highly anonymous context such as glory holes. The second form is free use to some. The person consents to free sexual access for a small select group, such as participants at a play party, a gangbang, or housemates. And then the last one is free use to one, the most common, where the person consents to free sexual access exclusively with their partner. Again, I'm going to stress that in all cases, limits and boundaries are negotiated beforehand, and consent can always be revoked. The person can say no and withdraw their free use at any time. Now let's talk about why people enjoy free use. A free use fetish can be enjoyed within a DS dynamic or outside of one. And while every person's desires are unique, here's some common reasons that people are drawn to it. Most obvious, easy access. There's no need for seduction or buildup. You can immediately satisfy your sexual urges without the effort of foreplay. It can also make the interaction a little more casual. So for some, the appeal lies in being engaged in a mundane task, such as washing dishes, watching TV, playing a video game, while their partner has sex with them, often without having to stop what they're doing. There's also the element of spontaneity. The thrill comes from the ever-present possibility of sex happening anywhere at any time. That unpredictability can feel especially naughty and exciting, whether it's a spontaneous quickie or sex in unexpected places. There may also be an element of objectification. For many submissives, a central part of the free use fantasy is that feeling of being used, treated as nothing more than a sexual object created for the dom's pleasure. Related to that is degradation. So for some, free use carries an added element of humiliation, depending on the context and what else is happening while they're being used. And then for some, it's an act of service. Some people might see it dehumanizing or degrading, and in some cases it is. But for others, they see it as an intimate act of devotion. Submitting in this way is a deep expression of care, showing how far one person is willing to go to meet another person's needs. Of course, you may have your own unique reasons for enjoying free use. So spending time exploring your erotic mind is going to be part of discovering what makes this dynamic meaningful and exciting for you. Now let's talk about how to engage in free use. Although the fetish uses the word free, doesn't really mean unlimited sexual access with no responsibility. In reality, free use requires communication, negotiation, and trust. It's about being respected enough and trustworthy enough to be granted that kind of access. So there's significant groundwork involved to set one of these up. The reward for doing that is that in that moment, you don't have to do the dance of asking, seducing, or negotiating. The access is already there. So with that in mind, let's look at how you can establish a free use dynamic. The most important thing to these is negotiation and consent, specifically constant communication before, during, and after. And in that, here are the key elements to consider. First, who is involved? Who is allowed to have free sexual access? For most dynamics, it's between two specific consenting adults. But if the arrangement includes multiple people, say a group or a party, it must be discussed who has specific free use rights to this particular person. Next is the activities. What activities are permitted during free use? Most often, they're sexual, manual stimulation, oral, vaginal penetration, or anal. But if you enjoy kinky activities, the possibilities expand quite largely. So define in advance what activities are allowed and where the limits for these are. You should also discuss time and place. When and where is free use allowed? Some couples are going to give blanket consent at all times, with a few exceptions. For example, maybe no interruptions during cooking, because splattering hot oil or catching a spatula in the face isn't very sexy. Other people might set limits by specific days or signals, such as wearing or removing a certain piece of jewelry or a piece of clothing to signal when free access is available and when it's not. So an example of this is a bracelet system, where if you wear a green bracelet, it's full consent, a yellow bracelet, partial consent, such as oral or body play, but no penetration, and then maybe red is not right now. The reverse system can also work. So maybe you're usually available, most times blanket consent is there, but at certain times, like during an important work call, maybe you have a signal then that shows free use is off limits at this time. You should also consider your physical and mental state. If you're sick or exhausted, free use may not be the best medicine. Though I do swear that sex with a fever is a very exhilarating and psychedelic experience if you do it once in your life. As for location, some restrict free use to just the home, while others might enjoy public play. If you're the person that falls in the latter category, make sure that you negotiate places where free use is allowed. And if public play is something that you're interested in, I'll leave a link down below to the video I did on public play and how you can do that safely and consensually. And then the last thing you want to think about in setting up this free use dynamic is safe words. How can free use be stopped? Because what separates free use from assault is the ability to revoke consent at any time. So define a safe word or a signal that immediately ends the activity, even if prior consent was given. All of this is why the word free in free use doesn't mean anything goes. It only applies to what both partners have explicitly consented to. So now that you know how all of that works, let's talk about some fun free use scenarios you could try. And technically, because free use could be at any given moment, depending on what boundaries and limits you've negotiated, it can fit into almost any scenario. But let me just give you a few ideas. First, the most obvious is during everyday life. One partner is going about their day, cooking, cleaning, reading, texting, working, napping, while their partner uses them. And here, the submissive is not likely to actively respond because the fantasy centers on them being a consensual object rather than an eager participant. As I mentioned earlier, you can also do this in public play. So choose discrete locations like a parked car or a single person bathroom, or at play parties where sexual activity is openly allowed. You may just tear apart your partner's clothes and take them right there on the spot. You can also mix free use with C&C, possibly by adding in elements like resistance or restraints, because being tied up and consensually used against your will can be exhilarating for some, especially with elements of degradation. But as always, negotiate beforehand. Another scenario is with being anonymous. So that feeling of being used can be intensified when you don't know who is using you. So common forms of this include glory holes or blindfolded scenes where the submissive can't see their partner. Group play can take this even further. And this would probably be the most extreme version of free use. So the submissive is available to multiple partners at once, sometimes being restrained while being used by the group. The specifics of who, what, and how must be negotiated in advance. So now you understand both the thrill and the responsibility of free use. It can be very intoxicating, the thrill of knowing when sex could happen anywhere, at any time, without hesitation. And for many, that spontaneity, objectification, or active service is what makes the kink so deeply erotic and satisfying. What's behind that fantasy is responsibility. Free use only works when it's built on trust, open communication, and clear negotiation. Without that foundation, it isn't free use at all. It's abuse. So as long as you're approaching this with care, free use can offer a rare blend of raw desire and mutual devotion. It's the freedom to give into your urges and the security of knowing that your partner truly wants it too. That's what makes it both thrilling and sustainable. In this video, I mentioned objectification and degradation and humiliation a few times. If these are things that you're interested in, I recommend checking out this video on degradation and it's being a misunderstood art in BDSM and the ways that you can incorporate it that work for you. So check out that video. And thank you so much for your time and attention.